For those of you who are unaware, with the drama that ensued with the Don't Worry Darling movie coming out, Olivia Wilde, the director of said movie, accused Jordan Peterson of being a king of the incel community. For those of you who don't know what incels are, they are involuntarily celibate, typically men, which are men who are considered undesirable, have not really been touched by a woman, loved by a woman, don't have girlfriends, and are seemingly perpetually angry about it. Did I phrase that
guys who want to
perfectly?
be with a girl but can't get one, basically.
Right, and we're going to go into the different definitions of it once we springboard off this Jordan Peterson video. We'll do the Merriam-Webster definition, and then we'll look at probably the more accurate one, which is from Urban Dictionary, which is so weird.
The based one, yeah.
It's so weird that Urban Dictionary is becoming more accurate than Merriam-Webster.
Well, Merriam-Webster and others have shown the willingness to change the definition of words based on modern woke or cultural trends. So,
Right. You can't trust these hoes, as I like to say. Now, let's watch this Jordan Peterson video and see what we think.
I thought I had an opportunity to say some of the things that were necessary to say, and I enjoyed very much talking with you and meeting your sons as well, and appreciated the opportunity that you presented to me. And I appreciated the opportunity to talk a little bit about the so-called incels, these disaffected young men. I was talking to a friend, what would you call it, an associate, someone who has knowledge of Olivia Wilde, who had recently made comments about me being king of the incels. And it's probably worth pointing out that she married a multimillionaire prince. And so, right, so she's the absolute epitome of female hypergamy, that hypergamy that makes females very judgmental in their choice, as they should be. But for her to have nothing but contempt for men who are struggling forward to try to make themselves attractive to women is a sign of a kind of deep narcissism that, on the female side, I would say, that deeply affects our culture. And so it was good to have an opportunity to clear some of that up. I've talked to lots of young men around the world about how they might make themselves more attractive on the friendship and career and dating front. And that usually has to do with telling them that, well, they have to subject themselves to that harsh judgment. And if all the women are rejecting them, either because they're too timid to put themselves forward, or they don't have anything truly to offer, which is something like productive, stable, wise, judicious generosity in the highest order, why would they expect a woman to make herself vulnerable, especially on the childbearing front, to them? And so if everyone is telling you that you don't live up to the necessary standard, well, then you can demolish the standards, or you can put yourself together. And one of the things that's been really heartening on that front is that many of the young men who have been listening to the ideas I've been generating and promoting have, in fact, put themselves together. And they come to my shows and they're standing up straight and they're dressed in often a three-piece suit. And now they frequently have a girlfriend with them. And they say something like, I decided to start being authentic and tell the truth. And I decided to adopt some responsibility and to grow up. And all of a sudden, everything's better. And the problems I had are going away. And so that's the solution to the incel problem. And demonizing people for being lonesome and isolated is not exactly helpful.
Yeah, let's pause there and talk. There's so many things to unpack there. First of all, he talks about Olivia Wilde and this idea of female hypergamy and the fact that she's married, quote, a millionaire prince. So you have Olivia Wilde, who is the seemingly conventionally beautiful woman, looking down on men whom are conventionally unattractive, when she has the whole playing field right in front of her to pick whatever man she chooses.
Right, very much a position of privilege.
Right. And so to come down and look at men who don't have that option, or maybe, as Jordan Peterson often states, have placed themselves in the position of not having that option, doesn't really make sense to me. And if you're going to label Jordan Peterson the king of the incels, I question why that is something that is particularly negative, because you are a person, Jordan Peterson is a person, who's trying to lead them down the path of getting out of that struggle that they're in.
Exactly. It's like you have to choose what do you want these men who are having a difficult time finding women, finding meaning in life. Where do you want them to go? Do you want them to go to deeper down the rabbit hole of rejection, of not having meaning, of feeling hopeless and despairing of their life and despairing of their prospects of not being able to find a healthy relationship or finding a way to integrate healthily into society? Because what Olivia Wilde's approach of shaming them and saying, from my position of being rich and pretty and wanted, you lame incel losers, you suck. What do you think that's going to do? It's going to push them further down that rabbit hole. And then when a healthy alternative arises, like in someone like Jordan Peterson, who's saying, hey, you should shoulder responsibility for yourself. Hey, you should find meaning. You should not give in to nihilism. You should try to make something of yourself and better yourself and stand up straight with your shoulders back and go out there and face the world and go on your own hero's journey and adventure. That's a much healthier path that they can take than the one that Olivia Wilde is pushing them down. So for her to simultaneously push down incels and mock the alternative that could be healthy for them is just, you're the problem. The incels aren't the problem. The Jordan Peterson's not the problem. You're the problem. You're creating the mess.
Right. If you had this disaffected community of people who you seemingly think are very harmful to society, why would your solution be bullying and ridicule?
Exactly.
I think that would make them more disaffected, more extreme, and more harmful if that's your view of the incel community. Before we talk more about this, I want to give you guys a definitive definition of this, or at least a definition that you guys can get a broader view of what it means. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of an incel is a person, usually a man. I've only ever heard it in reference to men, I will say.
Femcel is the new term on the other side.
Right.
That's for another day.
Yeah, that's for another deep dive. A person, usually a man, who regards himself or herself as being involuntarily celibate, meaning not engaging in sexual activity, and typically expresses extreme resentment and hostility towards those who are sexually active. You'll hear the term Chad and Stacy often. I think these probably started on message boards for people in this particular group and then grew outside of that as people outside of it adopted it. Now it's no longer primarily used, I would say. But that was a super meme for quite a while there. Urban Dictionary, which I have a feeling is going to give us a more acute definition here. Incel, short for involuntarily celibate, often built like a Discord mod, probably uses Reddit, gets no bitches, says the hard R while being whiter than Wonder Bread, smells like Axe body spray and or BO, plays COD, Call of Duty, and makes overused, quote, I identify as an attack helicopter, end quote, jokes. Has never felt the touch of another woman except that of his mother when she handed him snackies as a child. This one's far more insulting than the first definition.
Dude, dare I ask what the hard R thing means? I don't even know what that means.
He uses the hard R with the N word.
Oh.
Like if you hop in a Fortnite lobby for a second and you hear the N-word literally a million times.
Yeah.
Always hard R for the most part,
Gotcha.
I will say. So an incel is a typically pretty nerdy, probably not the healthiest, probably lives with mommy in the basement type of guy, if you can picture that. Of course, it's going to come in so many more forms than just that, but that would be sort of the epitome of what it means to be
you can
an
get
incel.
the caricatures there in your mind. I think everyone kind of has that caricature and knows what this is referring to.
Right. And when you search incel on Google, one of the first things that pops up, of course, is a definition. But if you scroll down a little further, it's this story out of Ohio State University. And it's Ohio incel pleads guilty to planning to kill women in college. I haven't read this yet, so we're going to click it. And of course, this is going to coincide with the idea that incels are a particularly harmful and extreme community that is hell-bent on, what should we say, seeking out revenge for their status in society?
Yeah. It's an angry nihilism. It's not feeling like you had a fair shake at life, so you're bitter at the world or bitter at the hand you're dealt, and then so what are you going to do with that anger and aggression? And you find a way to act out.
Right. So it says this guy pleaded guilty to attempting a hate crime after admitting that he planned to slaughter women in sororities and in college. Investigators found that the Ohio man had planned to kill as many as 3,000 people at a university and took steps to prepare for it. And there's his face. A 22-year-old man pleaded guilty on Tuesday to attempting a hate crime after admitting that he planned a mass shooting of women at Ohio University. Trezhenko at Hillsboro, Ohio, who posted on an incel website frequently and had firearms at home, had written notes about his plans to slaughter women, and took steps to prepare for it, authorities said. Genko formulated a plot to kill women and intended to carry it out, says U.S. Attorney Kenneth L. Parker. He said in a statement, police first responded to a domestic call at Genko's house involving him and his mother in March of 2020. While searching the house, officers found a rifle and a handgun, as well as notes detailing his intent to kill as many as 3,000 people. Very ambitious. With an M16 rifle at an unnamed college. The training needed to carry it out, and secondary plans for an ambush in a busy area, according to court documents. So, of course, obviously this story is seemingly true. It's been vetted. This has happened. And this is the first thing that pops up when you find incel. It would be hard not to just couple those two things together, being involuntary celibate and being a terrorist and being an extremist, which is so often the conversations we're having surrounding this community. And that's fair. If you go on some of these message boards from incels, they can be pretty shocking.
Yeah, and again, it's people who are young men who are disaffected and angry at the world, and I think there's a lot of similarities here to what we know about the Uvalde shooter, so first off, thank God that this did not escalate and that this was found out before he was able to commit any violence. But the fact remains that we do have this problem as a society of disaffected young men, and it is a dangerous problem. And you can look at these stories like this in one of two ways. It's like, well, there's this festering incel community online, and I'm going to associate them with this right-wing alt-right pipeline, and they're doing this, and it's all the fault of people like Jordan Peterson, who's king of the incels. Or you can really ask yourself, like, why? What is creating this? What are we as a society and a culture doing that is producing the disaffectedness of these young men?
Right.
And again, to kind of point to Jordan Peterson as the cause of it, rather than someone who's recognizing this problem and speaking to these young men and
proposing
trying
a solution.
Yeah. To me, is so backwards.
It is really, really backwards. It's like the community existed far before Jordan Peterson existed. I think this has been something that's been in existence, not necessarily under the term incel, but disaffected young men who can't find women have existed for centuries and will continue to exist. And I would argue that we probably all go through a period of inceldom. Like, if you really want to think about it, it depends on whether or not you couple that word with like being a terrorist or an extremist. If you do, then I wouldn't say we all go through that period. Sure. But we all go through a period in our lives of like being unattractive, seeing people who are attractive, seeing people who get women or men and going, oh, I really want that, and not knowing what to do with yourself in order to achieve that for yourself. And every human being consistently across all space and time has sought out and wanted love.
Yeah, if you've been through middle school, you've been through that phase of insecurity and trying to find, how I become someone who's socially accepted, how I become someone who's attractive to the opposite sex or the people I'm interested in. And that's a normal part of growing up and maturing and look, reality is reality, and people respond to things that they respond to, and they're attracted to things that they're attracted to. And I think part of the process of growing up is figuring out who you are, going out into the world, and then there's that negotiation, that back and forth with reality of, okay, people don't accept me when I go this way, or people don't accept this part of me, or whatever, and you deal with that, and you say, well, is that a reflection on them and them being a bully, or is this a reflection on, am I being socially awkward in some way, and can I fix myself, can I improve myself? And that's just that's growing up, that's maturing, that's just part of life. And anyway, I think we're creating a situation, though, as a culture in which the people who are falling off and losing hope in that process and don't have the strength to go through it and become healthy, integrated individuals through that process of maturity, they fall off on the wayside, and then they find these communities, and then this stuff festers. And that's the stuff that we need to focus on and try to reach into and give them an alternate path.
Right. And I'm all for, what do they call it? Radical personal responsibility. I don't think there's any one person who can be charged with the crime of creating incels. I think people make their own choices. If you're going to fall down this path and choose to be violent because of it, you've created that situation for yourself. Yeah. But when we look at a person like Jordan Peterson versus Olivia Wilde. Who's more likely to be responsible? I don't want to say responsible, but who's more likely to play a part in creating an incel? It's not Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson, if you take even a moment to look through his videos, says, men, you're responsible for yourselves. And if a woman doesn't want you, it's not your opportunity to go, what's wrong with women? It's your opportunity to look at yourself and go, what's wrong with me? And what can I do to be better? What responsibility and accountability can I take on to make myself more attractive to women? Whereas Olivia Wilde makes a video or a movie like Don't Worry, Darling, and spoilers if you haven't seen the film and you intend to see the film, which is all about disaffected men who then take on this violent course of action to essentially kidnap women and force them into their 1950s fever dream fantasy. So a man watches Jordan Peterson, an incel, and goes, oh, well, this man is putting an accusation and laying a claim on me. I need to be better. An incel watches Olivia Wilde and goes, oh, beautiful women are disgusted by me. They think I'm horrible. They think I want to kidnap them. They think I want to force them into this subjugated form of existence. I'm angry about that. And they're never going to love me. And nobody's ever going to want me. And I'm never going to reach this caliber in life where I'm accepted by society. Which one tips the scale and maybe creates an extremist environment?
Exactly. Oh, do you have something, Scott?
Yeah. I was going to say, to your point earlier where you were like, oh, why don't they offer a solution? Like Olivia Wilde is sitting there. All she is doing is critiquing.
Yep.
Whereas Jordan is offering a critique, but also tangible relative solutions to go about correcting that. And I think that's so important. And it seems to be the problem of the left in general, where all they are is just looking for that issue to critique solely, but to never offer a reasonable, rational solution to correcting it. It's all about, let's just remove that aspect purely from society and then we'll be okay. But it's like, that's not how reality works.
It's not how reality works. It actually, in fact, does the opposite. And it's like we tried to go and search on different social media platforms like Incel just to see what people were posting. You go on TikTok, you can't search for it. Similarly, you can't search for things like White Lives Matter or All Lives Matter on TikTok because they think that these are derogatory things that you could be looking up to radicalize yourself. Censorship causes radicalization, okay? So you have these young men who are looking for people who they can relate to, find the likes of Jordan Peterson or don't because he's censored, and then they go, oh, okay, not him, maybe Andrew Tate. Oh, not Andrew Tate. Maybe like a Sneeko character or whatever. And I'm not saying these guys are inherently harmful or anything like that, but then gone off the internet. It cascades. And it snowballs into, oh my gosh, where can I find anybody who is going through what I'm going through? I need community because we are tribalistic in that sense. And then they go, oh, I found this like little sub-community of people who have this secret website who are talking about the things that I'm talking about. And it's men who have already gone down that same experience of trying to find people and are now at peak anger, posting about their experiences, posting in this hole of the internet where nobody's going to find them. And they radicalize each other. And that is true. Like people see that as like a big word, but yeah, they do radicalize each other and they push each other further and further down the path because nobody else is willing to communicate with them.
Right. And how did they get down there in the first place? We've created a situation in which society that says there's no place for you here. There's no room for you here. And going back to what Scott was saying about Olivia Wilde, if you ask her, like, what is your message to young men? What is your solution? That like, what do you want them to do? You know, I don't know what her answer would be, but I imagine it would be something along the lines of, just based on what you can take away from the film, is men have had the power historically. So it's time for men to uncenter themselves and just become allies and just become male feminists and just let women have their time. And it's similar to the message of the movie Nope, but on racial lines of like white people have been at the center, and now they've historically oppressed the other groups, and so now it's time for white people to be decentered. There's no place for you. Shut up and just be the silent ally. And the problem with that type of thinking is just it does not create a society where you can have healthy interactions between races, between genders. It doesn't. You're excluding people, and that is going to foster resentment. And I think a lot of this incel phenomenon that we're seeing, and the people going further and further down the rabbit hole, is that, hey, we've created a situation in which there is no place for you to healthfully integrate into society, and so you're just pushed out further and further along the margins. And then the further down you go, we just shame you even further. And what what do you think that's going to create?
Right. It's going to create extremism. It's going to create acts of terrorism like the one that could have been carried out at Ohio State University. And again, it's not to place blame on people, but it is to say that one action often leads to the other action. And you have to acknowledge that. I'm curious to get into the discussion of, I'm of the opinion probably that incels have always been around, but it seems like we're inching into an era of violence when it comes to it. What has ushered this in? Is it this idea that men and women are equal, and now women are being sexually promiscuous, and they're seeking out the top 20% of men, and that bottom 80% is just sitting there disaffected, not being able to find anybody? Is it men's fault? Is it a lack of meaning? That is, men don't strive for anything? Is it a lack of role models?
Yeah. I think
all the above.
Yeah,
all the above.
It's like, how do you slice up that pie chart to say it's
Right.
like it's 30% just a lack of meaningness, it's 30% the decentering of man and not having a place for healthy masculinity in our culture. I mean, I don't know what the exact percentages are, but you can see these factors that play, like social media and algorithms is that playing into it. It's definitely a thing. We went on we'll get into it maybe later, but we're on Reddit yesterday, and there was a thread about who are modern role models for men or women, like in that are famous, and we like racking our brains. We're like, I don't even know. You have to like think back of historical figures or heroes in mythology and stuff. It's very difficult to find like just role models in society.
Yeah, and I say all the above in jest, but there's one part we've talked about a couple times where it's like, the third wave feminism is essentially telling young women that there's this Prince Charming out there, there's this perfect man that's out there, and I think that's also part of what's like an underlying factor to this negative view towards all men, because no one ever really lives up to that Prince Charming aspect, and I feel like it's just compounding itself, because anybody who doesn't reach that could potentially be just lesser or in that incel category. Exactly. So I feel like with all those factors are there, I just feel like the insistent feminist thought of no one's good enough for you, I'm always going to be the funniest, I'm always going to be the best, I'm going to be the smartest, all that kind of stuff, I think just lends toward men not feeling wanted and lesser.
Yeah, so we've got that. We've got the lack of role models and meaning. You've got the fatherlessness problem that we're dealing with right now, which is across the spectrum. A lot of people say it's a black problem, and it does disproportionately affect the black community, but it's all racist problem right now. And, you would think, and my previous self would have thought, oh, well, men are being raised by women. That's a good thing. They're going to know how to communicate with women better because they're with a single mom this whole time. They're with their sisters or whatever. This is going to help them build relationships with women, when in fact it does the exact opposite. You now have a feminized man who's only ever socialized in a female-centric environment and now doesn't know how to communicate like a man, which is what women want.
Yeah. You need... like young men need something to aspire to, something like a battle to fight, a vision to have, something to overcome, and that's like all of our old movies, like 300 or Gladiator or what's the Saving Private Ryan. Like it's not about glorifying the violence of war, but it's about seeing those stories of heroes and people who men who went out and did something great and like fought for their family or fought for their country or whatever, and like that's becoming something, like I've been watching this Rings of Power series just to follow. I keep bringing it up, but the way they're writing it now in modern Hollywood is you can't have a strong male character who's a hero. It's like there's a woman in every little cadre of the show, and she's the Mary Sue, as they say, basically can do no wrong, has no flaws, is not relatable as a real human being because they're just perfect. Yep. And then all around them, the men who are in Tolkien's lore as these, tall, mythological, awesome heroes who are leading armies and accomplishing great things. And they're basically just become subservient to these women in the shows, which again, here and there, that's fine if it's like serves a higher purpose in the show, but it's so clear from the writing that like, this is the world that we want to portray. And there's not a place for that masculinity. There's not a place for that strength and leading and courage and bravery and all those themes that are so, they're so evident through historically the stuff that we've associated with masculinity. And now we've just erased that. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing now is just that there's men are trying to fill the void but they're not being allowed to be men.
Which is so weird because it's like incels are ridiculed for like being lame and not getting women. And then women are angry at like the top 20% of men because they're with too many women and they're like F-boys and they're all around and they're sleeping with a girl here and sleeping with a girl there. But you're creating that. You know, when you have 80% of women vying for 20% of men, guess what? They're going to sleep with a bunch of women who are offering themselves up to them. And then you look at the other 80% of men who don't get anything and you're like, ew, you're lame and you're disgusting. It's like this whole cyclical problem that's just gonna keep continuing. It's so weird to me.
Yeah, and to your point, Taylor, about the lack of storytelling with prominent male figures. It's almost as though like the old mythological or archetypal stories, they displayed men as facing these insurmountable odds, which this world presents people with every single day. Even civilizations at large. But these stories used to show and depict these people facing these insurmountable odds and facing it with courage and going at it and finding a way through it, finding a way to overcome them. But removing that in the culture at large just makes everybody confused, especially young men. And right now, they're facing, these incels, you could say, could potentially be facing this insurmountable odds of trying to attract women in this day and age, and they're going about it in the way that they think is best, on the keyboards and whatnot, in the shadows. But that's because we've abandoned them with these stories of greatness of hey, you can do this if you put your mind to it and you push through it. So right. It's just storytelling in Hollywood at large is just vapid.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. It's wild. I'm like, it's Olivia Wilde.
It's all Olivia's fault.
But I think Jordan Peterson and many others in his space are offering a solution to that. And the solution ultimately within the bounds of our society today is like, you gotta start getting fit. You gotta go work to get a better job. You gotta make yourself somebody who's like courteous and generous towards women, but also like, what women are you going to be courteous and generous towards? Because there's a lack of good women too. Yeah. There really is.
Yeah, it's a mess on both sides.
It's a mess all over the place.
This reminds me too of when Dennis was here reacting to the Andrew Tate stuff. He talked about how traditionally our culture would encourage young men to reel in the parts of their nature that tend to be excessive, and for that it's like being sexual or like aggressive and violent. And so for men should learn to tame those darker angels of their nature, and that is the formidable thing. That is the heroic thing, the thing that we celebrate. And it's weird. It's interesting that when you talk about like women competing for this top 20% of men who are basically a-holes, who because they are exhibiting this toxic masculinity where they haven't tamed those parts of their nature, and because our culture doesn't value that anymore, or doesn't tell young men, doesn't acknowledge how men are. We're like, oh, there's no differences, or men are just inherently bad. And so there's not this like thing where, hey, if you want to be a good man, you should be strong. Like this, Jordan Peterson talks about this of like, you should be a monster. You should be strong and be like it's Beauty and the Beast. That's the traditional like romance story. If you have the beast, but it's tamed, and you can keep the worst parts of your nature under wraps. And on the women's side, we even discuss that. But Dennis Prager, we talked about in the episode where we talked about his article of women doing disproportionate damage to society right now. He said their excessive nature on their side that has to be tamed in is the emotional stuff. Right. And anyway, it's like we can just acknowledge these simple realities and create a culture and create a value structure in which we tell young men and young women to keep a guard on the parts of your nature that you need to keep reeled in, and that's going to create better outcomes. But instead, we're either saying when men and women are all the same, or women can do no wrong, men can only do wrong, and I think we're just so confused, and young men and young women are so confused, and it's creating so much dysfunction in how they go about having relationships with another, and dysfunction in society at large.
I'm curious to see like a longitudinal study on incels that like achieve jumping out of that space, and whether or not they jump to a place of like having a long-term relationship with respect for women, or whether or not they jump to a place of just sleeping around and still viewing women as inferior to men, because I'm curious to see just what the connection is, because a lot of people of course go and show the worst parts of themselves online, especially on anonymous like message boards. You're going to put your most salacious, most forward, the darkest, most intrusive thoughts you have on the internet. I'm curious if that translates to real life at the end of the day.
Yeah, or even just hearing real world examples. Like if you've had experience with this where you felt disaffected and were not able to have relationships, but then you got a hold of yourself. Like I hear Jordan Peterson tell some of these stories a lot, but I want to hear, if this has been something that you've experienced and you found a healthy way out of this incel mentality, like let us know, DM me or whatever, and we'd love to share your story.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because I imagine some of them jump out of it and they're like, oh, I just found a really good woman and this woman loves me and this is the woman that I want to be with. And then I imagine some of them jump out of it and then they're like, fuck women. I want to, sleep with as many people as I want now that I'm at this space. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I think we see the examples on both sides. Or actually, let me rephrase it. We see the bad examples. We see the ones who go down the route of the Andrew Tate style, masculinity, F women, and I'm going to
terrorism and shit.
Collect them like Pokemon, as Nico said. And then we see the ones who, go down the terrorist violence route and don't tame those better parts of their nature. But I think we should tell more stories of people who do it the right way.
Right. That was our incel deep dive for today. I don't even know if that's a deep dive. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface of that subject matter. But let us know your thoughts down below. And again, if you have any personal stories of your own experiences with this, we would love to hear more and love to get your perspective on it, because it's not an issue. It's hard to know a lot about this issue because you can't search it anywhere without finding just like the typical take on what it is and who these people are. And you don't hear from the people who self-identify.
Yeah, we haven't tried going down the rabbit hole of the incel websites and reading about
Not yet.
them.
I've seen a few of them.
Another day.
Yeah, I don't think we'll bring that to your eyes. Maybe I'll just experience that and tell you about it.